looking like this? Tell me, am I looking like this? No, not at all.
Hey, what's going on, you beautiful people? My name's Tie-Dye. I hope you guys had a pretty awesome day today. My day's been pretty awesome so far. So recently I uploaded a speed art of this image here. I titled it Factory, made it in Photoshop in Cinema 4D, and I got a lot of positive feedback. I think it was around 1,000 views and 100 likes a day, which is very great for me. I'm very, very thankful for that amazing support, by the way, so thank you guys so much for that. But a lot of you guys were asking on a tutorial and asking for me to produce sort of a how to make this, step-by-step sort of thing. And I was going to do that, but when I timed back on how long it took me to make this thing, it was about 2 hours. It would take me a very long time to do a tutorial on this. It would probably be closer to 2.5, maybe even 3 hours. It would be multiple parts. And I thought instead of doing that, I would do something even better and show you guys a step-by-step as to how I do a process of making an image like this. Now, what I mean by that is, what do I do before I actually start making the image in Cinema 4D? What do I plan out? What are my tactics as to, keeping things together, grouping, texturing, lighting, all that stuff? So I'm not going to be going exactly over how I made this. I'm not going to go over it step by step, but I'll show you each individual method that I use for each individual section, such as, the basic sketching, the basic shapes, going into more detail with some of the other objects, texturing, lighting. So not a exact step by step. If you guys are looking for stuff like that, you can find other tutorials on my channel. Everything in this image here I've actually covered in a tutorial somewhere else, so I'm just going to show you my process, and it starts off with either a actual sketch pad or jumping into Photoshop. So recently what I like to start doing is actually sketching this out, and I do that by either going into Photoshop or going and just grabbing like a pen, paper, and sketching it out. So what I have in front of me here is some isometric grid paper, and you can find this on Google Images pretty easily. It's something that's just one Google search away. You can print it off if you want to, or you can just open it up in a program. And this sort of makes you be able to sketch onto it and follow the lines that we're going to be following for our isometric viewpoint here. So I actually drew mine with a pen and paper, but you can sort of just go over this and see what I mean, and just sort of follow it, get the basic shape, and go from there. And honestly, I never did it on Photoshop just because I don't have my tablet plugged in, but if you just want to do it here, you're more comfortable with that, you can go ahead, but just sort of block in your basic shapes. And the reason sketching is so important is because it lets you know what you're doing at what time. Before I started doing this, I would often get very lost as to, what I want to do after I get the main building in. Like, for example, later on in my sketch, I started adding things like the mailbox, the boxes coming out, the meter there, the switch, the camera, stuff like that. Those are things that I added because I had time to sort of sketch it out. And without the sketching process, it would have just been the building with the conveyor belt and the smoke pipes up top. That would have been just it. So sketching's important because it lets you see everything without actually, having to do a lot of work to see what it would end up looking like. So once you have a basic sketch as to what you want to do, you're going to want to open up Cinema 4D, and we're actually start modeling this. And we're going to start off by just getting in the very big shapes. So obviously, as you saw in this image, the main shapes are squares. So I'm going to put in a big square, and since I know that this main square here is going to be pretty big compared to everything else, I'm going to just bring up the size from 200 to 400 for the X, Y, and Z axis. And then I'm going to go into my other viewpoints here and just sort of drag it up, holding shift and getting it exactly up onto that grid line there. Oh, let me just get back into my other viewpoint. There we go. And then, so that's our main basic shape there. And then we have another basic shape, which is another square in the front. So I'm just going to create that by once again hitting the square option there, and then dragging this one up equally onto the same point, just so they're level with each other, and then dragging it out and just sort of eyeballing where I think it looks good. Right about there looks good. And with this, we pretty much have our entire basic shape. That is essentially everything I did so far to just sort of get an idea as to what everything looks like. That's the basic shape of the building. There's really nothing else I can do for the basic shape except for cut out this little hole there. And one of the main things I want to explain is when I'm making this, I'm not doing anything too crazy. Pretty much every single thing within this image here is made using 3 tools, which is the bool tool, the bevel, and the extrude tool. And honestly, I've done tutorials on those in the past, so I'm just going to show you how I can apply those 3 tools to create every single thing in this image. And like I said, I'm not going to go over every single last step, but I'll show you what I mean by that. So first of all, I'm going to name these, and that's very important to keep things named. So I'm going to name this main, and this one front. Of course, name it whatever you want, whatever floats your boat here. This is completely up to you. This is all personal preference. Front, And from there, I'm going to delete these two things called the Phong tags, because what they do is it makes it, once you start changing the shape of it, it's going to round it out for you, and we don't want that. It's very, very low poly. So I'm going to click on our main, and I'm going to show you those three tools I talked about, which were the extrude, bevel, and bool. So I'm going to hit C on the keyboard, and I'll show you what I mean by how I can make every single shape with just those three tools. So I'm going to go over here to my live selection and make sure I'm on polygon mode. Click the top of this building, so this polygon is selected up top. Right click and go to bevel, and with bevel selected, I'm going to click and drag out, and as you can see, it just bevels the top there, so it looks a little bit more like the image here, where it's sort of like it's coming in, it's more beveled in. And then with that, I can then extrude it down, and there's two ways to extrude. You can either hold Control and drag down, or you can right click, go to extrude, and use a similar tactic to as you beveled. So now that I've used bevel and extrude, we sort of have this dip and railing around the top of the building. I'm gonna do that again for the front part here. So we're gonna make it editable by pressing C on our keyboard. Make sure our live selection is on and our polygon mode is selected. Click on the top, right click, go to bevel, click and drag out. And then from there, I am going to hold Control and extrude down. And as you can see, we've already got the basic shape right there. So those are the two tools. There was a third tool that I mentioned though, which is called bool. And bool is essentially cutting out objects from one another. So that's how I made this hole here. I'll show you how I did that. So I'm gonna go to my main building. I'm gonna go to object mode. I'm gonna import another square. Now the way that bool works is essentially what you're going to do is one object is cutting out from another. So whatever's overlapping is going to be cut out from a certain object. So I have this cube here, and I want it to be cutting out whatever's overlapping into our main cube here. So I'm going to go over to this array icon, hold and click it, and press on bool, drag both the cube that I'm cutting out and the main into the bool, making sure that the one that we want to be, like the solid object to be on top of the other object, because if I put the one that I'm cutting out of on top, we're going to have our main building cutting out of our cube, and we don't want that. So make sure the main building is on top, and then you can go to your cube, adjust it a little bit, make sure, you know, if you want the door to be a bit bigger, move it down, up, whatever you want. It's all personal preference. I'm going to move it a bit deeper actually. And there we essentially have the main shape of our building right there. So those three tools, which are the bevel, the extrude, and the bool. So I want to show you how you can apply this to something like perhaps a door. I actually had someone on Twitter ask me how I made the doors, and I'll show you exactly how it's done using the extrude and the bevel tools. So for that, I'm just going to import a cube here. And before I do anything, I also want to rename this to main building with hole, just so I know that that is the main building there. And it makes it a lot more simple. So I'm going to go to this cube here, and I'm just going to resize it with my being on object mode, and I'm just really going to eyeball it. That's what I do for a lot of this isometric stuff, and I'd say a good door size is about that. Just sort of get it into a rough position, and then I'm going to zoom in on it here. So I'm going to make it editable by pressing C and then deleting the Phong tag like usual. And with the cube selected, I'm going to go to my live selection, polygon mode, click the surface, right click, and then just press bevel and drag out. And as you can see, we sort of have this door border around here. And if you want to go even further, if you want to, you can hold Control and extrude it in a little bit. And that's pretty much how I made a door frame right there. If you want to go even further, I'll show you exactly how I made the door. I then imported another cube, brought this size way, 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 way down. And this is just going to be the main door handle part. So just continue shrinking this along. And as you can see, you're going to pick this up very fast. Like a lot of this stuff is just doing it by eye. And it's like a very, very simplistic, minimalistic style as to how to do all of these different tactics. So I'm just going to get this into place. And roughly to where a door handle would be. It's obviously a lot better to have reference images with you. I just don't have any for this, and actually didn't. I was just going off of the image I drew earlier. And then for the handle itself, I just took a torus, pulled it out, rotated it 90 degrees, so holding shift, and then I went to slice, made sure there was a slice on it, and I just rotated it back another 180, shrunk the size down, Probably have to shrink it a little bit. Yeah, a lot more than that. But as you can see, like how simple it is to just sort of get some of these basic shapes in. And that's all you really have to do is just get the basic shapes in. And from here, I'm just going to put it into place. And I'll show you one very, very, very handy tool. And let me just make sure that's centered. That's close enough. From a far away point, you really won't be able to tell. So I'm going to select all of these objects within our door. And then press Alt-G. And what this does is it puts it all into a group null. So now the whole door is, I can select it all at once. And there's a little drop down menu here with all the different items in it. So I'm going to name this door. And what I can do with this is I can then duplicate it by holding Control, clicking the door, and dragging up. And now there's a second one. Drag this door over a little bit, go into here, and just sort of mess around with the positioning of the handle. And then sort of position both doors. And now we have a double door building. And as you can see, like these are very, very simple tools. Like this is me using the basic shapes and 3 tools built into the program to make these shapes that I've made so far. Very, very simple. I'm going to show you one more thing. I'll show you how I made the smoke pipes at the top of the building, because that's the only thing that's not really square in the entire image here. So to do that, brought myself in a cylinder. I'm just going to reposition this. I'm going to scale it to the size that I want, put it into position, and that seems pretty good. I'm going to hit C on my keyboard. I'm not going to delete the following text. I want this to be rounded because it's a sphere, or not a sphere, a cylinder, sorry. But what I'm going to do is go to my live selection mode, go to my polygon, and just click and drag a ring around here. And we're going to extrude it up, so holding Control, just lifting it up a little bit, let go, and then do it once again to go higher. So now we have this ring here. If I click on it, you see this ring around it that we've made through 2 extrusions. And if I click off here so we don't have any more selection, I can just hold Shift and go all the way around. If you do go out of the lines, you can press Control and click on them holding Control. But I'm just going to keep going around, holding Shift and going all the way around. I know there are other ways to do this. There is a ring selection, I believe, and you can also select through objects. But for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to do it really fast that way. And then from there, we can right-click and maybe go to Bevel and just bevel it out like that. So now we have a ring around our pipe. So like very, very fast stuff like that. And then just to finish it off, maybe something I'll do is go to this top part, right-click, go to Bevel again, bevel that up, and then extrude it down. So very, very fast, we've made like a pipe that has a ring around it and it goes down. And then of course I can just duplicate that using the object mode, of course, and just drag it over. And then name those, you know, respectively pipe and pipe 2. So yeah, I'm sure you guys at this point have really got the hang of the fact that with those 3 tools, you can make pretty much any shape out there. The only thing that would really throw someone off might be these rectangles right there, and that's honestly just extrusions, just putting in a cube, extruding it to different ways, just sort of out, to the right, forward, down, and so on, making sure it's just tight and hugging the building. The text is just going to MoGraph, MoText, and of course that's going to take a second to load up, simply because I have a lot of fonts. So that was honestly just me writing something, sticking it onto the building there. Of course, that's not exactly what it looked like, but you get the point. But yeah, so that's the basic main way I did that. The only real difference I would say that really stands out would have been the conveyor belt, but that was just a bunch of squares. And those are the only 3 tools that I use. Now moving on to something a little bit different, I'm going to talk about texturing. And this is something which is super important with any 3D work, but I feel like it's a lot easier when you're working with stuff like this. So what I'm going to be doing here is just like very, very basic texturing. That's all. This is what I normally do for my low poly isometric stuff, is I just kill the specular, go into the color tab, and just pick whatever color I want. In this case, I had like a pinkish color, so I'm just going to slap that onto the front, slap that onto the main building, and of course you can change the colors to whatever you want. And then the doors. The doors, I had a bit of different colors, so I'm going to make a new texture. Just make sure specular is unchecked like the other one, or do whatever you want. This is completely yours. And I'm going to make a bit more of a white color that I'm going to make the base of the door. And then I'm going to make the handle of it pink, just like the other one, and then just do that for the other door. And the cool thing about this is if you saw in my other image, I actually had a door up on the roof, and it was very, very fast to do that because all I had to do was just duplicate the door and bring it up there and rotate it. So as you can see, like being able to keep these things in nulls is super, super efficient, very, very fast and easy to do as well. And then I guess I'll also texture this here. And a cool little tip for texturing this kind of stuff is for the pipe itself, I'm not going to do this completely properly here, but you'd want to do is just like we textured or selected the entire ring on the outside here, you'd want to do, you'd want to, slap on your basic color for the pipe, and then you'd want to go around with your polygon mode and just select the ring to make it, just for example, a different color. And of course I'm making this very, very sloppy because this isn't an exact tutorial, but just more or less an example as to how to get a general idea as to how to do with this stuff. So as you can see, there's a ring right there, and it's not all the way around obviously, but that's just for demonstration purposes. And then the one last thing that I want to do here, I'll just put some color on this one, is show you how I light the scene. So to light the scene is actually a lot more simple than some people might have you think. And what I like to do though when I'm doing isometric is I just sort of have a plane on the bottom here, and I'm going to make this plane white just to go along with the theme. And of course this isn't exactly like the image I showed you, but this is just the method like I said. So what I'm going to do here is first of all change my camera to the isometric viewpoint by going to cameras and then going to this little drop down menu at the bottom here and clicking isometric. Everything is obviously in the wrong angle, so I'm going to select it all and just rotate it. Make sure object mode is on. Just rotate it 90 degrees. And of course you can mess around with positioning everything a little bit. I'm just going to position this a little bit better. And I'm going to go into my render options by pressing this little like director's clipboard thingy with the gear behind it. Go to Effect, Ambient Occlusion. I'm going to bring the contrast up to about 5%. This is just personal preference, but just make sure you have Ambient Occlusion selected and Global Illumination. From there, what you can do is go to your floor option, hold and click it, and go to Physical Sky. And this is pretty much all the lighting I do usually. I just have the time on 12 o'clock, and I'm just going to rotate it until the light is pretty much lighting up everything fairly well. I'm going to hit render, and we're going to see what we have with the lighting, because that's pretty much all I typically do for the lighting with these kind of scenes at least. And as you can see, it's lit pretty damn well. And if you had a bunch of things in there, adjusted the colors to be a little bit better, you can see how fast this is going to end up being like something that looks just like this, which was my original render without Photoshop work. So if I open up this Cinema 4D file and then this, as you can see, like things are pretty similar. For the most part, everything's the same other than the additional shapes that I added. But like I said, it's just using those three tools that I demonstrated earlier. And then the door was just a recreation of this door, and then that little square was just a recreation of that square. All this stuff was just basic shapes and the extrude, bevel, and bool tool. And then I just kept working on it for a few hours and then exported it. The only other thing that we really need to do now is open it up into Photoshop and adjust the colors. So I'm just going to use this image here, which was my original one, and I'm going to open that up in Photoshop. So I'm going to press File, Open, find that file on my desktop somewhere. Here it is. And the only thing I really want to do here, and this is just obviously my personal preference, is I'm going to drag out my ruler guides here, bring them out to center it, and I'm going to press Control-T to recenter this, bring it up a little bit. And then for me, all I really want to do, like I said, is adjust the colors, make a background, and that's pretty much it. So I'm just going to make the background kind of a gray, and it's going to bring my brush size up, color in the background. And one of the cool effects that I like to do here is I'm going to select my layer with the factory on it, press Control-J to duplicate it. So now we have two of these, as you can see here in the layer tab. I'm going to click on the one on the bottom, press Control-U, go to my lightness, bring the lightness all the way down to 0, and then with that same dark layer selected, go to Filter, Blur, and Gaussian Blur. I'm going to bring this out until it looks like it's, you know, pretty clean, maybe something like 38%, and then just drop the opacity just so it looks like there's a bit of a shadow around the entire thing. That's just something I like to do. That's just one way to do it, one of many ways to do it. And from there, what I want to do is maybe make a new layer over our background color just to sort of have a gradient. And there's so many different ways to do a gradient. I'm just going to be honest, eyeball it with my brush being at a hardness of 0, making it dark at the bottom and light at the top. And then just sort of bringing the opacity down. If anything, I even want to change the darkness of this bottom layer to maybe something like that. And from there, the only things you really want to do is mess around with your hue and your curves. So I'm going to go into my hue and saturation tab first, which is located under the adjustments, and just sort of mess around with the hue first, see if there's anything that you want to change. You know, you can change the overall color. Honestly, blue looks pretty good. I'd have to change some other things there, but that looks pretty cool. I'm not going to mess with that too much. Saturation, if you want to be very colorful, maybe black and white. I want mine to be a little bit more dim, simply because it's not the most exciting scene in the world, right? It's a factory after all. And then from there, you want to go into your curves and just mess around. This is honestly all personal preference. Just adjust things a little bit. Go through every single color, see what looks good. Obviously, I want this to be a bit more of a red theme, so I'm going to bring up the reds a little bit. Green, bring those down. Maybe adjust some other things. And just sort of mess around. Blues, let's see what we can do in here. That looks pretty cool. So if I take off these hue and saturation and curve layers, you can see it goes from this to that. Just some, like a nice little pop. And of course you can do your color correction, anything you want. Put a title, sign your name, and you're good. So that's pretty much my process as to how to do everything. Once again, I like to sketch things out either in Photoshop or in real life, then go into Cinema 4D, block out the main shapes, make sure I keep everything nice and organized with titles and nulls, then go and make sure that I make these smaller objects, which I do using the extrude, the bevel, and bool tool, texture everything, add a nice lighting effect with a physical sky, render that out in whatever render format you want. If you're looking for my render settings, pretty much all I would do is choose the size you want, make sure alpha channel is selected, and put it on PNG. That's all I really do. And then open up in Photoshop and just add those simple effects. And that's pretty much all I do, guys. Hope you guys learned something from this. Hopefully you did enjoy as well. If you did, a like, comment, and subscription on this video would be absolutely amazing. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. My name's been Tie-Dye, and I'll catch you in the next video. See ya.